coming out on a Saturday in the afternoon of all times. Okay, we'll try and do this in sections to be as fair as we can. So we'll go up and down the middle side. Who wants to go first? This side. Man in the middle. Can you wait for the mic? There's a mic coming.
For me, the logic is undeniable. There's no two ways about it for me. Unfortunately, I'm feeling quite emotional at the moment, give me a moment. Unfortunately, though, because people can be quite superficial when you're talking to them about this idea, what would you say to anybody who just doesn't like the idea of the planet turning into a mass of circular cities and potentially destroying the landscape of our cultural heritage?
Well, the cultural heritage always changes. It's always a process of evolution, so I think, when people are romantically inclined to support this system, I try to call them out on the fact that throughout the entire history of humanity, we've constantly changed. We've constantly evolved and done different things, typically associated with the advancement of technology. As far as the circular cities, not everything has to be circular. I think there's a misconception that people see that and they think that, the ideal, as pointed out, I talked about the logic of simply having a circular city. It's equidistant. You can move more easily. It's an ideal. Jot designs all sorts of city structures. Many of them are very much almost traditional, if you will. They're meandering. Different land masses have different requirements. It's the mechanics of it that's important. It's the sustainability attributes. It's making things as efficient as possible with the most efficient use of energy, with the allocation of where the food supplies are going to come from. All the attributes that are talked about in the film, it's really the design, it's the logic of the design, not the design itself. The logic makes the design. So you could have a very different visual structure in different locations depending on what you have. Like if you're in a big geothermal region, you might have a very different structure based around where the residential areas are, where they gain power from geothermal. The industrial center could be off to a completely different area. So you see my point? So it's explicitly based on the reasoning of the region, so it builds itself. That's the beauty of the resource-based economy, is it's self-defining if the interest is to be at peak sustainability, which is the term that I use. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and in terms of efficiency, I don't think anybody can disagree. I think people sometimes they bug about the character being lost.
Yeah, I understand that. Again, it's a romanticism. People, I think if we look back into, you go to ancient Rome and you look at the ruins, and you think to yourself, maybe New York City would look like some atrocity to those living in the Roman Empire. You know what I mean? So we don't have the luxury at this day and age to worry about ostentatious aesthetic issues as far as I'm concerned. To me, in my personal opinion, I think it's beautiful. I like the way an airplane looks because it's efficient. They can't create little ornaments on it because it's defined by the artistic attribute is defined by the efficiency that's required. I think in all of Jacques' designs, people say, oh, you're very creative. And he'll actually sit and explain everything that comprises the curves and why they reflect the style that they do. There's a reason. It's utilitarian. But it's also artistic in its inevitable natural formation, derived logically, inferentially from the need to be sustainable and efficient at all costs. So I just think, to me, the warmest thing I could ever see is really a beautiful building that's designed beautifully to be sustainable. Not what it looks like, not the ornament and the fixtures, but the fact that it works so incredibly well. To me, that's my romanticism. I'm attracted to that as beauty on every level. So there's differences of opinion. So that's kind of what I would say. I would challenge someone's opinion and say, well, I think differently than that. Would you prefer to live in a really inefficient hut that has no heat, that can't support you, that is not self-enclosed, that requires all this external stuff and maintenance, or would you like to have a home that can last your entire lifetime with virtually no maintenance, that is self-sufficient, self-supporting? I think if you draw the utilitarian arguments, you bring them up to people, they'll quickly concede, I think. I mean, what matters in the end? Does it really matter what things look like in the long run? I think we tend to be aesthetically driven just because we grow up into it and we identify with it. I have plenty of artistic things and visual things that I identify with. I think they're beautiful walking around London. There's always just amazing old architecture, but I see it and I appreciate it for the romanticism of it, but I also know that things change, and it's more important, I think our survival is more important than efficient survival in the long run is more important than just, you know, the aesthetic romanticism. So I think most would agree in the long run. But that's an argument that you can use if you encounter someone that says, oh, I don't want to live in that, it's ugly. What kind of rationality is that, you know?
Okay. Done? Somebody in the middle? Anybody in the middle? Guy in the green here, Jason. This guy in the green in the front row.
Hi Peter, films are great. My name's James, I'm a researcher at Oxford University in environmental studies.
Okay.
And I also want to riff on this theme of efficiency, ask a question about efficiency. It seems to me that the efficiency that is required to sort of bring about global sustainability and sort of equality for everybody, that's a function of sort of three things really. The resources we have available, the population of the planet, and the sort of the quality of life that we want. And until we've determined what those three things are, do you think there's a danger in saying things like efficiency at all costs, given that that could lead to a loss of certain cultural attributes like architecture that people appreciate in the here and now?
Well, efficiency at all costs, I think, is simply a general rule that, you know, and we could get to a point where the efficiency, you know, that extra 1% of efficiency is not necessary. You don't have to go through that just to get that little extra bit, because maybe things are so sustainable that there's such an ease already and this population is satisfied, it's not necessary. If you go back to the third point you mentioned in that list that you had regarding where the needs are, really, in effect, our needs should be related to what is possible with the internal structure, the inferential logic coming up from what I call natural law, based on what the Earth can support, based on what we're defined by the environment that we're born into, and we have to align with it. So the maximization of utility, if you will, this approach really defines our needs, and we really have no choice but to kind of fall in line with natural law. You know what I mean? People have a tendency to be very personal in their lives, personal in their views, thinking that they have some freedom of thought that somehow exceeds their reality. I'm sorry, that doesn't really work that way. We have to align with things, and our values should be derived. So it goes the other way around, is my point.
Yeah, as an environmentalist, I'm very sympathetic to that argument. But my point is that I think we could get to a stage where we can produce, where we don't have to be super efficient, where everything doesn't have to be around it.
Right, yeah. Well, yeah, I understand.
And so how do you determine that?
Well, that's what I just commented on, that extra 1%, or that extra 5%, or that extra 10%. I mean, it's not like it could be a stickler and go, well, we have to do all this and this and this. If things are working properly and they're sustainable and there's limited negative retroactions and everyone's happy, we don't have some kind of, you know, deep poverty here, we don't have pollution here, or deforestation here, or peak oil here, or any kind of peak resource. If everything is in balance and it's being maintained, then it becomes kind of a moot issue. If it's working and everyone's satisfied, there's no reason to have to go to some crazy, you know, extreme length of efficiency. Sure.
Okay, can we go to the right now? This person here with another?
Hi. Can you hear me? Good. Yeah, I just want to say I've been successfully brainwashed by your movie. Thank you very much indeed. I wanted to say I think the film's amazing at dissecting the evils inherent in our money system, which are palpable and there for everyone to see. I also think it's a great advert for your resource-based economy. It looks a bit like utopia porn to me in some instances.
Excuse me, can you ask the question?
Yeah, sure. What I'm basically saying is I think the film's weak in terms of describing the transition from the place we're in now to the place that you're advertising. And that's the real problem that I have with it. I can't wait to be in that world, but how do we get there?
Well, that's the million-dollar question. That's why we're here. That's why there's an event tomorrow. That's why the Zeitgeist movement exists. You know, there's only so much I as an individual and my conditioning, my temperament, and my intellectual capacity can say. I couldn't sit here and tell you how to, quote, change the world. That's going to come from another place. That's going to come from, well, first of all, it's going to be navigated dynamically by what I consider to be the collapse of civilization because of what's outlined in the film. You're going to have problems and pressures that are going to emerge, and you're going to have people seeking solutions to override them. And the hopeful thing that will happen is that this type of direction, this logic will pull through, as opposed to people falling back on some other outdated view. Critical mass, though, is really what I'm going for. As I, in Zeitgeist Addendum, it started there, where I made that point about the need for critical mass. And it's, if this film doesn't carry over into the activist angle, but in the Zeitgeist movement, I talked to extensive lengths about the need to get people together across the world. And once you have enough people, you begin to put pressure on the establishment. You begin to have, you begin to have economic conferences with scientists that are behind it that can show the complete redesign of North America. That show you, boom, here it is. And you get other country leaders or whomever to start to think about it. And you, in my mind, you develop a parallel structure, a parallel group of people that want to do something completely different. And hopefully, again, the logic will pull through, and the timing will be such that it hits a tipping point, and the powers that be are willing to accept, or maybe will be forced to accept, based on the uprising and civil unrest and everything else that's happening, which I think will continue. That's how I see it, loosely speaking, a transition occur. But there's so many things that you really can't predict. So, but at the very base level, you have to get the world wanted. You have to get people across the world, across all borders, because this is a global concept, to want this.
Can I just say as well, it struck me that it wouldn't be this is the sort of thing that everybody has to sign up to in order for it to work, surely. If you're talking globally, well, what are you going to do with people that insist on being irrational?
Well, I think the term, the Amish exist today. The Amish have isolated communities. The Amish have chosen to live lifestyles. And there are many other, religiously oriented subcultures that live very, very differently than the modern capitalist, global society that we have now. So you can accommodate those things. If someone doesn't see the efficiency, if they're really against it, there's no reason that, that there's some animosity there. But they have to understand that if, 60% of the world population wants to live in a resource-based economy and 40% don't, well, you can only hope that a compromise can be made. But I think actually those statistics that I just mentioned are kind of inaccurate. It'd be more like 90% of the population wants to live, because you really do need global resource access, back to your first point. And then the other 10% can be supplied with what they need. But what would you do if you were the other 10%? And you're watching everyone live in a very nice, so I believe that they would come over to the other side to see the fruits of this. In fact, I have more respect for the Amish and these more simplistic subcultures than I do for this modern capitalist world that's hell-bent on destroying itself. So, see my point. It really comes down to where the stability is. And I think that in the education of anyone, they'll begin to reconcile that it's in their best interest to join a system that's actually sustainable and hopefully progressive and be willing to accept these changes.
Sure. Okay, back to the left-hand side here. Go ahead. We'll come back.